morning, everyone, and welcome to our December Provider Forum. And this is going to cover quality assurance. And we're delighted to have Kimberly Houston, one of our colleague members and the founder and CEO of Logistique Consulting. And I'm going to open it up to her and let her go ahead and start with her presentation. You can take a moment to introduce yourself. You're muted, Kimberly.
There you go.
There
There
you
I
go.
go. All right. Well, thank you, Dina. I appreciate this opportunity to present today. And good morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly Houston. And as Dina mentioned earlier, I am a colleague member. I am also a member of Clarent Quality Council. I am a Med-waiver provider and a consultant for Logistique. Let's see here. Let's see about PowerPoint presentation. There we go. So for today's objectives, we will be discussing the use of provider self-assessments and to ensure quality assurance. So in the words of Peter Drucker, what's measured improves. But before we do a deep dive, I just want to reflect on again, what exactly is quality assurance? Because quality assurance focuses on maintaining a desired level of quality in a product or service by actively managing and improving all stages of its production or delivery. It's a proactive approach that aims to prevent defects before they occur rather than just identifying them after the fact. So essentially, quality assurance is making sure you have a 360 approach when it comes to your operations to ensure quality outcomes for the individuals you serve, staff, and families. By any chance, did you all know that the requirements for all waiver providers encourages the providers to conduct a provider self-assessment? If you can send up an emoji, just so that you knew that, just so that I can get an account of who actually knew that. All right, great. Thank you for sharing. Well, when I saw that, I was like, that is interesting. This small picture here is the iBudget Med-waiver Handbook, Appendix B, on page B-13, item 8. And you can see here that the provider self-assessment is encouraged. So when I did a deep dive, I was like, what exactly is a provider self-assessment? And when I did my deep dive, I discovered in the 2022, the original implementation of the requirements for all waiver providers PowerPoint presentation, slide number 31, a provider self-assessment is an evaluation completed by the provider reviewing an organization's capabilities for meeting the client outcomes or goals and the service requirements. It includes review of internal policies and procedures, plus provider can ensure quality services. And I think to myself, wow, there's no template for it. So let's see what we can develop. And per the definition, these appear to be the 4 components that's a part of that: the organization's capabilities, the client outcomes and goals, the service requirements and quality policies and procedures. So with that, we added to the chat a handout that I created for you all's convenience. You are more than welcome to utilize this, amend it, and or again, utilize the systems you already have in place. So we're going to start by breaking it down by each component. There will be 4 sections, and after each section, we'll pause for questions so that if you have any, you're more than welcome to please drop them in the chat. So for section 1, the organization's capabilities. We want to be able to take a look at, because we are a business, whether we're a for-profit or not-for-profit, You want to be able to take a look at the revenue and expenses of your business, and if there's a profit or loss. And that way you can be proactive and get ahead of any gaps that may be happening with your finances. Because as you know, which brings us down to item number 4, the 60-day reserves are a best practice. You are required to have that if you're looking to open or expand to include an adult day training center or a group home. Either way it go, having 60 days of reserve, particularly now for those of us that are ADT providers, allow us to be able to waiver the storms when there's transitions and the various policies and or changes that's happening with the agencies. So you want to position yourself that you always have that to access. And then when I speak, I'm privileged to be able to work with clients that are coming with providers that are coming on, and I try to give them some pointers. And one of the things that I share is if you are able to have a 90-day reserve, that's the safest, because when you become a brand new provider or when you expand, there's these expenses that you do not anticipate, such as you've acquired real estate and all of a sudden you need to put windows in so that it can be in compliance for you to obtain your license. And or for your adult day training center, there's some more requirements related to the vehicle repairs because you're required to get the annual inspections done on your vehicles. And then all of a sudden you need to buy a set of tires. So you want to kind of give yourself like a 90-day reserve to be able to have in your account at all times, because in this industry, it is very fluid. And one of the things that I've noticed from a consultant side, the providers are looking to expand and they're like, oh, I have all this money. And when in all actuality, they're running on fumes when they're going through the expansion process. So the goal is to be proactive here. You also want to take a look at the number of employees you have, new hires, and employees separated, because that's very important to understand if you're looking closer at your retention rate, if you need to put in a recruitment plan, and if there's progress, are there career paths for your employees? So you want to be able to take a closer look at those things. When it comes to your workman's comp claims, that is critical. We, as a provider community, will literally lose our insurance without notice if you have a set number of claims. So you want to be proactive in making sure you stay on top of that. And if staff are truly being hurt or they're trying to get compensated on your behalf, basically. So you want to be mindful of that. Then I recommend looking at your company vehicles in use and your company vehicles not in use. One of the biggest expenses we have as providers is transportation, from the commercial insurance requirements to the van maintenance to the fuel. So you want to be mindful if you have a fleet, particularly how many you have in your fleet and how many are actually working and what part of your fleet that is time for you to downsize and or repurpose and or sell so you can put that money back into your budget. And if you're anything like me, my first vehicle is on that I purchased for the company is on her last leg. The staff named her Blueberry, and I am not able to part ways with her. So yes, I am wasting money in repairs and I am wasting money in insurance because I am not ready to part with her at this time. But I am taking an evaluation. I am going to complete this evaluation at the close of this year, and it may be time to let her go. So I'm preparing myself for that. So next, moving on to the next component, note that per Henry Ford, quality means doing it right when no one is looking. That does dive into client outcomes and goals. We've already talked about being capable as an organization. Now we have to focus on looking at the clients we serve. So the number of clients we've served, how we're doing this year, and then next year, right? Or the previous year and then next year. The number of clients separated, the number of clients returned. Even though that more than likely that's going to be a pretty low number, but it's nice to know if you made an impact and you lost a client for whatever reason. They may have moved away, or there was just some disconnect between them and the staff. If they're able to return, that's wonderful. Also, taking a closer look at the number of incident reports is critical, because you have your internal incident reports that supports your reactive strategies and or what's happening with your operations. If for nothing else, I don't care if it's a scratch or a fall, I strongly encourage you promote internal incident reports. But also you can use incident reports to be able to look for a pattern. I know we think the best of our employees, and we're prayerfully hoping that all is well and that there's no abuse, neglect, or exploitation going on. However, it does happen. So you want to know if there's a pattern with a particular employee as it relates to incident reports and your clients that you serve are being injured or exploited in any way. The number of medication error reports. That's really good. And I promote medication error reports, just because, for one, we have to be in compliance, but for two, it helps us to understand if you have an employee that's not very strong on medications, that you can do that one-to-one peer-to-peer training with them because they apparently are having challenges in that area. So you want to be mindful of if there's a pattern of an employee that's always having med errors. Let's take a closer look at that. Let's do some hand-over-hand training. Next, moving on to client grievances, the client goals that were met for the year, and the client goals amended. What is happening with our clients, their position on it, their guardians, and their family members. You want to be in the know without question. It's a part of the customer service that we provide. And your best advertisement is word of mouth. The clients will share, the families will share, the guardians will share. So you want to prioritize that, especially those grievances, because if you can get ahead of it, that's a way of being proactive. Back to the definition as to how we started this training. And then when it comes to client goals amended, I just want to sit there for a second and say, I want that to sit with you, and I want you to be mindful that if you amend a goal, you want to ensure that you get everything in writing. So although you may have a conversation with the waiver support coordinator, the family members, the clients, you want to follow up in writing. As per our earlier conversation, John Doe has decided to move in a different direction than the goal that's reflected in a support plan. This will be his new goal effective this date. Print that email. You want to, also add, please reply, confirm, and receipt. If you can modify the support plan, please do so. But either way it go, you print that email, you attach it to the support plan as proof. Because when clearance review is conducted, they are looking into APDI Connect. They're looking to make sure the goals match. And if there's any difference in that, you want to have proof that effective whatever date this change and as to why. So the ultimate goal will be to ask the waiver support coordinator to amend the support plan, but sometimes that's not always the case or the easiest process. And that concludes the second component of the 4-part assessment that we created. So I think that's a good time to take questions. Ms. Dina, are there any questions in the QA feature?
No, I don't see any questions, but people can certainly unmute or raise your hand, and we will be glad to answer anything. But I don't see any there right now.
Okay, not a problem.
Thank you, Kimberly, for taking the time to go over this with us. We really appreciate it, as always.
You're most welcome. Thank you so very much. So moving on to component number 3. Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of intelligent effort, according to John Ruskin. So as we take a closer look at this, the takeaway is to ensure that you have systems in place to stay on top of our reviews that are required for us to function as a provider. So when it comes to your clearance review, there's templates out there. Of course, in my perfect world, as a consulting firm, we can come in and look at your books, but the reality is you can do all of that for free and build systems in your place where you can have your staff, your direct care instructors, your leaders to go in, pull the free one-page checklist and go through the books on a quarterly basis or a biannually basis so that you're better prepared for when you have your clearance review. Once you have your first clearance review, you already know what your next cycle will be in terms of your review period. So take advantage of looking at your claims, looking at your documentation in advance, and cleaning up whatever's necessary. Next, you have your APD annual review. If you have a licensed group home and now a licensed adult day training center, well, I take that back. For your group home, it'll be an annual review as it relates to licensing your group home. But for the adult day training center, it'll be every 3 years from the last portion of the compliance or the regulations that I read on that. So either way it go, when you receive those assessment tools from your health and safety monitor, please take the time to comb through them and see how well you're doing with ensuring that you're in compliance, and take the time to bring yourself into compliance if you're not. All right. And then there's the annual CMS review. Again, they're looking to make sure all things health and safety and to ensure the client's needs and goals are being met, and that the environment is that we're integrating the individuals we serve into the community, and that our homes and our ADTs are not a prison, so to speak. So they're making sure they're integrated in their community and they're safe. Then there's the comprehensive emergency plan, which is required for licensure, regardless of the facility type. You want to take a look at that and update that. Like for me, I had to sprinkle in the purple alert because it wasn't a part of mine. And that was something I wanted to add for the staff to be trained on. So those types of components are very, you want to make sure you stay on top of that. And on your cover page, you can just continue to document when you last updated it so that you know that you've looked at it for the year, even if you don't make any changes to it. Then there's the staff and the client annual forms. Now, I will tell you, this is an annual process. Everything that I implemented in 2003 nearly has been changed one way or the other. So I strongly recommend you have a system in place. As you know, Clarence asked, when are you going to do your annual in-service? So prior to that date, you take the time to comb through your forms to make sure they still meet your needs and the individuals you serve and your staff. Taking a look at your internal incident reports. Again, I can't re-emphasize enough how important it is to look at not just the ones you submit to APD, but what's happening internally that you may need to close any gaps on. The number of compliance notices for every notice of noncompliance, or what we call RUM letter or plan of remediation. You're always in a position of growth. You're always in a position of updating, modifying your internal processes and your policies. So more than likely, you will be having changes if you receive any type of compliance notices. So take the time, make those changes, and service your staff, and then all is well. So you can do it. So what I typically do is follow up with any type of compliance notice. And when we do our annual update, unless it's a form that needs to be signed immediately, then we talk about the changes during our annual in-service with the staff. You definitely want to take a closer look and keep up with your fines or any recoupment as a result of the documentation, whether you knew or understood those compliance requirements or not. And I know it's a lot right now to wrap your mind around as it relates to utilizing and implementing the use of iConnect, and then you have your hard copies. But for all intensive purposes, I want to encourage you that if for nothing else, make sure your hard copy files are solid, and then you dump stuff Connect. That's my best advice that I can give you so that you're not as overwhelmed. As of now, we do have some compliance requirements in iConnect. However, The reviewer, has been my experience, will also triple check when they come on site to help close the loop. But if you advise them that everything you've done for that person is in iConnect, that is where they're going to start. And they typically start there. And it makes the review process go so much quicker. So I believe for those of us that are still on the fence about dumping our stuff into iConnect, there's benefits to that from when you have your clearance review. So please work towards it. But I will say for the record, we are not held compliant. I mean, we're not being held I guess you would say, we are not being held accountable for not having things into iConnect in terms of recoupment until December of 2026 was the last guidance that we all received. But I do want to encourage you again, if there's a way you can start dumping things into iConnect, and yes, I've heard rumors that it's going away. I've heard that. However, I haven't seen anything in writing yet to support that it's going away anytime soon. That's my advice that I'll leave you with. The number of grievances, being mindful of your staff, clients' grievances are critical. If your clients and staff are complaining about leadership or the environment, or because there's frivolous complaints just because they can, right? And then there's also complaints that are legitimate. Take the time to deep dive. Because when clients and staff don't feel heard, you will lose them. And again, everybody's a part of that process of making sure you stay in business, but you want to create an environment that's not toxic for the client nor the staffs that work for you. And then there's the annual satisfaction surveys. With your annual satisfaction surveys, I recommend having one for your staff. I'm sorry, you could do one for your staff, but one for the clients as well as their guardians and family members, because you want to know if things are going well or areas for improvement. And it's not something you have to share. It's an internal document. And it's something that you could take back, meet with your leadership team and say, okay, we have a gap here. How do we close this up? And before I move on to the fourth component, I just want to confirm, are there any questions or concerns about service requirements and quality?
We do have a hand raised. Gerardo has
Okay.
a question. You can go
Okay.
ahead and unmute yourself or put it in the chat, whichever you prefer.
Yes, I have a question. Is there a way you can do a progress note on the iConnect? I do one every 3 months for every consumer, but haven't seen the way of doing it in iConnect.
That's a really good question. If you can drop your email address in the chat, the QA feature, then we can look into that and get back with you. And the reason why I said that, because I know they were making amendments in the system. One of the things that I'm looking into is how can I drop my adult day training daily notes, because we do daily notes, into iConnect. And right now I have not been able to identify the process for that. So we can just add that to the list. Is that okay, Ms. Dina?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay. iConnect notes, and you say every 3 months. So I just want to confirm, this is not your quarterly. Is that what I'm understanding? This is just for informational purposes? Gerardo?
Correct. It's for my quarterly progress note that I make for every consumer.
You do a quarterly progress note, and then you also complete a quarterly summary, correct?
No,
Okay. What services are you referring to?
personal support, respite, and LSD1.
Okay. All right. So we will look more into that and follow up with you. And did you drop your email address in the chat features so that we can?
Yes, I did.
Okay, perfect. So we'll be following up with you.
Thank you very
Thank you. That
much.
was a good question. You're welcome. Are there any more questions, Ms. Dina?
Not at this time.
All right. So we'll move on to the fourth component of the handout that you received. So when you look at your policies and procedures, and yes, that's the best picture I can get to fit in the slide, but essentially, I wanted to point out, and I can't re-emphasize the importance of combing through your policies and procedures to make sure they fit what's happening with your organization. As your organization grows, so will the culture of your organization. So the policies that were initially in place may no longer be a best fit. And then there's new developments within the agency that may require you to modify the policies that you currently have in place. So having something in place, and it doesn't have to be the template that I created, will be most helpful in making sure you're keeping up if and when you make those changes. The policies listed here in the handout are just the usual policies that you should have in your policy and procedure manuals, but I'm more than certain some of these organizations are older than me. So you have tons of policies and procedures. So you're more than welcome. Again, I believe we provide this to you in Word. Ms. Dina can send it out at the end of the presentation, but you're more than welcome to amend this so that you are well aware and you have all your policies listed and in accordance to how they're named, and then you have some way that you're tracking when you made an amendment. So essentially, the fourth component of your provider self-assessment, you want to speak to your policies and procedures. And in the first column, did you make any changes? Yes or no? You could check the box. The date that it was modified, if you did, so that you can know the last time you touched that policy or you made some changes to it. And then if there's a new provider advisory that comes out, you're able to dive back in. You'll be like, oh, I haven't changed it. So let me get back to making those changes. And then when I have my annual in-service, I can then have the staff to sign off, the clients, the parents, and the guardians. And again, you have the dates on that. And then when you did the in-service, you can also capture it here in that fourth column. One of the policies that I definitely want to point out that is new to me is the transition of life plans. One of my colleagues that I love dearly, Miss Michelle Tellini, and I was having an elaborate discussion about something that happened in her operations that made me think, I have to add this new policy now because I don't have it either. But it's an event that someone meet their demise while they're in your care and they don't have a guardian or a family member that can make decisions about their life. Do you have the medical health proxy in place? Do you have a power of attorney in place? And what would you like for us to do with your body? Do you want to cremate? Do you want to have a funeral? And do you have an insurance policy in place so that we can take care of those things? Or is that going to be an expense of the company so that you know how to plan for each individual that you serve? So for me, when I do my deep dive in my policies, after my much needed vacation, when I return, that's one of the first things I'm going to do is write that policy. Because again, after talking to my colleague, I recognize we work well with our families, but should something happen, what do we have in place for that? So just want to leave that with you in that thought. Are there any questions or concerns as it relates to policies and procedures for your self-assessment?
There's not anything in the chat right now. So again, people can unmute or raise your hand.
All right. So moving on, quality assurance is essentially a refining process. I know as a provider, it's a bit of a workload, to be totally honest. In the process of providing the care, the documentation requirements necessary for the service, customer service to the clients, the families, the guardians, the training, development, recruitment, and the retention plans for the staff, then all the financial requirements to be a provider and to stay and to grow your organization. It's a lot of work. Some of us are gifted. We're large enough where we can have individuals that have these fancy titles such as chief financial officers, COOs, CPAs, administrative assistants, all these wonderful titles. But usually when you're starting, whether you're a for-profit or non-for-profit, it's boots to the ground. You're starting grassroots and it's a lot of work. So understand when it comes to quality assurance, it's a refining process. What you have in place now probably won't work for the majority of what you do a year later. So taking the time to evaluate that is a necessary evil. It is very necessary. So I recommend starting with identifying issues with your process. Generating corrective actions related to whatever that gap was. Let's see how we can shore that up, right? And then beta testing it as you verify the corrective action. Like, okay, so let's beta test this. Let's see if this is going to work for us. And then with the small sampling of that, then you can implement it across the board and then monitor and control the situation. If it's not working, you start the process all over again. Because one of the things I've learned is what changes the culture of your organization equally is bringing in new employees that are innovative, that are tech savvy. For me, we're big on using JotForm. That's my go-to for everything, and Google Workbooks. And it just makes the business run easier because we're a smaller organization. So finding ways to stay on top of everything related to your organization is critical. And then you won't be in damage control mode all the time. So that is the goal of quality assurance. So the takeaways for today's training is develop a system or tool to evaluate your operations. Whether you utilize the handout that I provided or not, implement strategic planning sessions. So meeting with your staff so that they can understand the why to what they do and how can we make this work better. And I'm not saying that you have to do it all at once, right? So basically, how can you eat your favorite dessert if it was the size of an elephant? Of course, you will eat it one bite at a time. So think of that when you implement your strategic planning sessions. It may just be what will be our efforts for filling the beds in our group home, and you focus on that. Then you pick something else where you have a gap in your organization. What will be a way in which we can have a recruitment plan, a retention plan, an incentivizing plan for our employees? Then you pick something else. So that's a process, and it's an ongoing process. And you can do that through strategic planning sessions with your staff and or your colleagues. There's some people that's been in industry forever and they don't mind the phone calls. Like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. What you think? So take advantage of having those people in your network and being connected to organizations like the ARCA Florida colleagues. There's so much information. There's involvement from the executive the leadership team all the way down. So get involved so that you're abreast of all the changes. Be intentional about refining your process, right? Just as I explained that what works today may not work tomorrow when you bring in that new client. Evaluate your policies and procedures. If for nothing else, I can't say that enough. Your policies and procedures can literally save your business. can also be the difference of having to pay unemployment when you know there's an employee that you need to terminate, that they need to be separated from your organization because they don't properly represent your brand, or their performance is subpar or barely any at all. So you want to be in a position where you have the supporting policies that said this person had progressive corrective actions, hand over hand training, additional supports and education, and they just could not perform. And then when they file for unemployment, you submit your policies, so saying that they signed off on this, and you can be sometimes exempt from having to pay that unemployment. So again, that's just one of many examples. Another thing that I witnessed in my career, again, I'm a former COO of a larger provider at that time, and they were having a company picnic, and the staff injured themselves during the company picnic, right? And of course, it's a company picnic. You didn't have anyone to sign off on anything that if you play kickball and you get hurt, that we would be liable for that. And that's what happened. The staff decided to sue because they got injured at the company picnic. So I know as a provider, we work very hard to build our brand or maintain our brand. If we come in as a CEO of these organizations that are fairly large, you want to always position yourself in the position of protection of the brand. And that brand includes everyone, right? So just be mindful of what you have in your policies and procedures, because it can make or break your organization. Are there any questions about quality assurance or the takeaways at this time?
I don't see anything in the chat, but we will be sending the information out to all attendees as we normally do. And I will include Kimberly's contact information so that people can reach out to her directly. And of course, that's in the presentation as well. Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions or comments, then I'll just say, well, we appreciate Kimberly so much taking the time to give this presentation, and we hope everyone has a good week.
Thank you. Thank you, Dina, for having me.
Thank you.